Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, brains behind the business. It's your front row seat to the business elite. New episodes twice a week.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Calvarowski, and as always, the yang to my yin is here, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I am fabulous. How could I not be fabulous? We showed up in rapport today, both wearing navy blue. How many times has that happened to us in 160 some odd shows?
I feel like we've matched a few times, but it's not as often as every week. So it's a fun day today. And of course, we got to start off with a quote.
Oh, yeah.
And I have one here actually from one of our former guests, Alex Edmonds, out of the London Business School. And he wrote a paper in August of 2024. And the quotes from that paper, and he says, DEI is associated with higher future accounting performance across a range of measures, higher future earnings surprises, higher valuation ratios, but demographic diversity is not. And so, of course, for folks out there, we are currently running a DEI program. And so I've been digging into the research. And also, the big point here that I want to make is, and we've known this also, Amy Edmondson's research with pharmaceutical development teams has backed us up, is demographic diversity is not enough. You need the equity and the inclusion as well as this, and once you have inclusion and trust, psychological safety in order to get that performance. And so that's where I wanted to start today. Of course, we have a special guest with us, Ron Haas, the Global Client Managing Partner at PwC. Ron, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you today, Rob and Susan.
What do you think of
Absolutely,
that?
Ron. And before we jump in to you, I'd love to hear your perspective on that
Yeah.
quote.
Me
Well,
too.
first of all, I also want to recognize that I'm wearing navy blue. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was going to call it out too, but I didn't want to
I'm not sure
foreshadow.
if it's planned. Listen, there has been a lot in the last several years spoken around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And maybe a little bit of context might be helpful. I have 8 children, and we had 6 biological children. And then we decided to adopt, and we adopted 2 boys from Ethiopia. When we adopted them, they were 5 and 2. They are now 19 and almost 16, and they are wonderful young men. And when I think about being a parent and how that has taught me and allowed me to flex different muscles, I think about inclusion, and my eyes have been opened to that concept, to be quite frankly. As a white male, I understand that I am in the majority. And quite frankly, I don't believe that we can truly address and get to an inclusive environment unless we engage the majority in a meaningful, impactful way. And so I love, Rob, to think about, I don't like the word diversity, to be quite frank, and that could just be me, because I'm not sure it creates space for me. But inclusion creates space for me, and it creates space for everyone. And it's not just how I look. It's my background, it's my interests, it's where I grew up, it's what I want to be, it's who I am, it's all of these different aspects go into an inclusive environment. And so I love the word inclusion because I feel like it creates space for everyone. And I got there because I had 2 sons open my eyes to the fact that in some circles, they aren't included. And so that opened up my mind to think, well, why is that? And how can I make a difference in that? Not just in my home, but in our community, in our world.
Woo, right out the gates, I knew you were going to come firing up on all cylinders, Ron. I just want to take a moment before we dig deeper into this whole concept around diversity, equity, inclusion. I want to plug our audience into you, your backstory a little bit. I am fortunate enough to be privy to that. But yeah, I want you to share with our audience a little bit about the mission that you're on in this world as it pertains to leadership and the purpose behind it.
Yeah. So several years ago, I was approached by an up-and-coming leader at a pretty large organization. And he made an interesting statement to me, Susan. He said, I just don't think I'm going to be a leader here. And I thought that was interesting that this person would say that based upon not only where they currently sat in the organization, but what I saw as their potential future in this organization.
Right.
And the more I spoke to this person, it became evident that they were equating leadership with a name in a box, a particular role, a position. And the more we discussed, it became apparent that they thought of leadership as a position and not a process. And in reality, we had a really rich conversation. Everyone has an opportunity to be a leader within their sphere of influence or responsibility, their stewardship, if you will. And in the end, inspiring leadership is less about the position you have and more around the impact that you can have in the lives of others. Too many people in this world, as it relates to leadership, people follow them because they have to, rather than they choose to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love developing leaders that people follow because they choose to, not because they have to. Which creates a very different dynamic on how you lead. And so I believe that I'm very careful and conscious and deliberate about who I call a leader as a result, and demonstrating and exhibiting the behaviors of true leadership.
So, Ron, we have to ask you there, what are the behaviors of true leadership?
I did set that one out there, didn't I?
You teed us up good.
So I believe there's 3 P's of being a true leader: purpose, people, and performance. In that order. And I'll explain that in just a minute. So I believe a true leader is grounded in purpose, focuses on people, and delivers on performance. In that order. And what I mean by that is that a true leader makes choices and decisions within the context of who they believe they are, but more importantly, who they can become. So often, leaders focus on what they do versus who they are, right? And I think there's a real distinction there. As a result, back to this notion of people follow because they choose to, not because they have to. A true leader understands that his or her role is not necessarily to create followers, albeit that is important in order to get something done and achieve a vision. It's really, in the end, to create more leaders, right? The whole notion of working yourself out of a job, if you will, right? And so that's kind of one point as it relates to this whole notion of being grounded in purpose. The number one question when I ran leadership development at PwC that I got from partners was, I'm trying to figure out my purpose. Why is it that I do what I do? And you're smiling, Rob, because I'm sure you're asked the same question over and over. Why am I here? What am I doing? Right. And I thought the more that we got into this, it became apparent that they weren't talking about their day's work. They were talking about their life's work. And true leaders, when they're grounded in purpose, can link their day's work, in other words, what becomes a career, to their life's work. That linkage is the definition of a true leader, one element. The second element of people, focus on people. When I led a market for the firm, I used to stand up in our market meetings when we bring all our staff together. And I was known for the following statement: clients come second. And when I first made that statement, people looked at me like, we're a client-centered business. Are you kidding me? Clients are at the center of everything we do. Well, maybe. I think that if people are at the center of everything we do, clients will feel like they are at the center of everything we do. Particularly in a business like ours, where it's so people-centered, right? What does a consulting firm sell? The ideas, the aspirations, the hopes of people, right? We're in the business of selling ideas. In fact, I kid around with my kids. I said, people pay me for my ideas. I'm willing to give them to you for free, right? You should listen. So it's this focus on people. And if we focus on people, then it creates an environment where our clients or customers feel like they're number one.
Mhm.
Feel like that. Because in the end, aren't our clients or our customers, aren't they people too? Aren't they people too?
Right.
And then thirdly, performance. Deliver on performance. And we do that in a way that's complementary and not competitive. This is I think the fundamental challenge with many organizations today, particularly with so-called leaders, is that they put in place performance management systems that are competitive
Mhm.
versus complementary. And so that's when you end up getting the silo effect across the organization, right? Susan and I are in different groups. We're dependent upon one another, but the metrics are set up in a way where we actually compete with one another instead of being complementary to one another. And so I believe if you set up performance management systems in the right way, you actually can achieve a complementary effect versus a competitive effect, which means you focus on metrics that are team-based, not individual-based, where I can't possibly be successful without you, and you can't be without me. And in the end, isn't that what team's about? It's about me being able to do something that I simply can't do on my own. Or else, why would we have come together in an organization? I might as well be a sole proprietor and just doing my own thing, right? But it's not about doing your own thing. It's about doing it together. Because in the end, if teams are structured the right way, Rob, teams complete one another. They don't compete with one another. So grounded in purpose, focused on people, deliver on performance in that order. We can talk about what the reverse order looks like in a few minutes if you'd like.
Right.
But that's what I believe true leadership looks like, feels like.
Well, this definitely aligns with our mindset in regards to leadership as well, which is exactly why we were so excited to have you on this show. This is Leadership 2.0 to us. That's what our mission is called, changing the way the game of leadership's being played forever through the people-centric approach to building high-performing teams, right, and individuals. And we always get looked at sideways when we bring our leaders into a new locker room, right, Rob? And the very first place that we start is the who are you exercise. You know, we get so much pushback in a corporate space. Like, I'm here to learn about leadership. Tell me what to do. And we're like, can we just slow our roll down a little bit and really get into alignment in terms of what leadership even is, right? So this is where I want to go next, because obviously we believe that self-leadership is the best foundation for any people-centric leader to begin their development on, right? From a process-oriented standpoint. But why do you think in a corporate world in 2024, Ron, when we've been hearing about human-centric leadership for so long, and the stats and data back up that in fact does curate the highest performing teams on the planet, why are we still the anomaly in terms of developing leaders from that starting point known as purpose? Because purpose to me really is your purpose is to do the best you can with whatever the heck God put in you, you know, that bag of tricks in terms of the things that you possess that you have to contribute to this world that are valuable. So why is that still so confusing in a corporate space from a
It's
leadership
harder,
development standpoint?
Susan, it's harder work. It's harder work. It's deeper work. It requires more, not just mind, but heart. It requires
Mm-hmm.
soul. It goes much deeper than just memorizing a series of facts, looking at a spreadsheet, sending out an email. You know, I mean, we've seen the so-called leaders. Again, I use that term.
Quote unquote for everybody on the airwaves.
Yeah, the so-called leader,
Yeah.
right? That manage by email, manage by spreadsheet. Notice I'm using the word manage and not
Mm-hmm.
lead. I believe we live in a world that's overmanaged and underled.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
We
So
are
true.
overmanaged and underled. And so if you go back to this construct of purpose, people, and performance,
Mm-hmm.
managers begin with performance,
Mm-hmm.
go the other direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, we're going to focus on performance. So, hey, Rob, send me your scorecard. And there I'm going to evaluate your performance. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where they stop, right? And then when performance doesn't work out and it's not going the way that they had anticipated, then they start, well, I wonder why that is. Well, let me maybe get underneath the number. Let me get underneath how we've gone about motivating people to do this. And then they start bleeding into people a little bit. But that's unfamiliar territory because they were never promoted to do
For
that.
that.
They were never they were promoted off the spreadsheet. They weren't promoted off of the individual connection, the emotional connection that you develop between another person. And then the ones that really get it when they realize, well, wait a minute, if it's about the people, how do I better connect with the people? I connect with the people because I have a context of purpose and who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And if I can explain that and articulate it, it brings that out in others. Blown away when I have these conversations with clients. You know, so many people feel like you want to show up and tell somebody everything you know about a particular topic. By the way, that's the consulting model, right? Model, right? Rob wants to see me. I'm excited. I come over. He's a client. He wants to talk about a particular topic. And what do? I show up with a 25-page deck and I walk through it and I tell you everything I know about that topic, right? Recently, I took on a new client several years ago, and I had an opportunity to go and meet an executive at this client. And I was going with a fellow partner. The fellow partner says, listen, we've got to put together something to show this client when we get there. And I said, well, I'm not sure what we want to show them. He says, well, he may be interested in this and this. And he was like kind of guessing at the topics, right? And I said, well, rather than guess at the topics, which we will probably be 80% there, how about we go and get to know him a little bit better, build a relationship of trust, and earn the right to understand what his priorities are, what's important to him, what's relevant to him in his world. Well, I'm not sure that's going to work out. Well, let's give it a try. So we went over, we sat down in the meeting. This client came in about 5 minutes late. He sat down, he folded his arms, and he says, what topics do you have for me today? And I looked out of the corner of my eye and I looked at my fellow partner and I could see him sweating. I told you this happened,
Yeah.
right? Here it goes. And I called the client by name and I said, you know, we don't have any topics for you today. Then I paused for a minute and he looked at me a little confused. And I said, I didn't want to come to this meeting assuming I already knew what was important to you before I had a chance to get to know you and understand what was important to you. Understand your background, understand what it is you're trying to do. In other words, I'd like to understand you before I understand what. I want the who before I get to the what. Then I can understand and appreciate the why. And so he says, well, what would you like me to do? You want me to introduce myself to you? And I said, yeah, I think that'd be a great place to start. Right. And so it's just not something that people are promoted from. They're just, it's not put as high. Who's ever sold the most? Who's ever delivered the most? But how we go about doing that, I believe it unlocks the human potential that we have in all of our organizations. Said another way, I think we leave a lot on the table. We leave a tremendous amount of performance and outcome on the table because we're only looking at the performance dimension. We're not looking at people. We're not looking at purpose. And so an organization that has an amazing year, I'm convinced they could have an even better year if they started with purpose, then went to people, then went to performance in that order, which also means we need to probably create space for people to act that way and behave that way and exhibit characteristics that are indicative of that mindset. That purpose matters, that people matter, that as a result, the outcome will be performance, not the other way around. And I think also sometimes people think it just takes longer. And you know what, Susan and Rob, it probably does take longer in the first meeting. But after that, the speed of trust just accelerates. It accelerates. And you don't have to earn it every time you go. Every time you go, because you've only focused on the performance piece. It's grounded in them and it becomes a part of that relationship, and it's what connects you.
So, Ron, of course, we have to ask you when we're talking about purpose, where do leaders start with their own purpose? And then how does that transition into the purpose of an organization?
Yeah. So individuals have to see a connection between their own life's work and the work of the organization to which they're a part of. They have to see a connection there. And, I've worked with many organizations over the years, including my own, to which I'm a partner owner, and we have amazing value statements. We have amazing purpose statements. All organizations have those. But the key question is how does that relate to my purpose as an individual? Do I see a connection to that? Not just about how I can contribute to it, but how it can contribute to mine. It's both ways, right? It's both ways. Which, by the way, that's what drives engagement. That's what drives employee engagement. It's when they can see the connection between what I'm doing and a belief and a conviction in what my organization's doing. They can see those connections. If they don't, it doesn't matter how much you pay them, you will never win hearts and minds. And by the way, if compensation is the only thing you're using to retain them and get engagement, you're going to be outbid at some point in the future, right? We have to win the hearts of our people, not just to keep them, but to engage them, right? And so I think it really comes down to being able to not just articulate what our mission is as an organization or our purpose, but also having open dialogue with one another about how that connects. We put out all these amazing phrases and amazing documents. Do we take enough time to actually unpack them? And, most of the organizations that I work with have mentoring, they have coaching. You ask them, well, who's your mentor or who's your coach? Oh, it's so-and-so. And then I ask the question, have you ever had a conversation like this with that person? No. Well, then what are they coaching you toward? What are they coaching you toward, right? I've heard it said that the joy we feel has less to do with the circumstances of our lives and more to do with the focus of our lives. Do we have those kinds of conversations with our people to really unpack what the focus of their life is? And then the natural extension is, how can we as an organization help you achieve that? And how can your focus help the organization achieve its purpose? It's not rocket science to me. It's simply having dialogue and creating space for those kinds of conversations, because I think people want to talk about it.
We think you're right. We agree. So if this is a leader that's listening right now and who maybe has heard us talk about some of these crazy themes around purpose in the context of people-centric and, yes, high-performance leadership, and they are feeling the inspiration coming from these airwaves right now, I just know when I start to broach this topic in session with my leaders, they oftentimes get very overwhelmed in terms of where to start, right? And it just purpose seems like such a big topic for a leader to even have to engage in developing and understanding if that's nothing that's been on their radar before. So what suggestions do you have, Ron, for our leaders that are listening that are feeling inspired to want to get into alignment with their known sense of purpose today?
I would ask myself a couple of questions. Number one, what am I truly grateful for?
Ooh, tell us why you would start there.
Gratitude, I believe, is the mother of all virtues.
Mm.
It opens up space for you to see things you haven't seen before. And when you express gratitude, it actually creates more gratitude. It's exponential in its effect upon you. And if you can unpack what you're truly grateful for, it starts answering the question, I wonder why that is. And it directs you to this sense of purpose. There's a reason that you feel that sense of gratitude for that. Ask yourself why. Why am I feeling that way? A second question you might want to ask yourself is, what generates the most energy or enthusiasm? Just thinking about the topic, I almost come out of my chair, right? Whatever that topic might be. It's just, oh, I'm just excited about that. Whatever it might be. And then third, it's a bit of a sobering question, but I've attended a couple of funerals lately, and you want to have a sobering experience and a very reflective experience. Attend a memorial service. I'm not saying go out and find a memorial service to attend, but you attend a funeral service and you listen to the life of someone and how that life is being honored. You can't help but start asking yourself, I wonder what's going to be said at my funeral. How will my life be honored? Ask yourself that question now. What will be said at my funeral? What kind of person was I? How did I treat one another? So those are a few questions that kind of come to mind, but there was an exercise that I've done and I've had other people do quite frequently that could help as well. Cast your mind forward to being maybe 80 years old and write a letter to your present self and give advice, counsel, direction, mentorship from your 80-year-old self to your 40-year-old self. What would you say? What would you tell your current self that they should focus on? Remember, joy and fulfillment have less to do with the circumstances of our lives and more to do with the focus of our lives. So what would the 80-year-old Ron tell the 50-year-old Ron? I didn't tell you how old I really was. He should focus on. What should he focus on and why? And that exercise really starts unpacking where your purpose lies and where you draw meaning in your life. Mark Twain said the most important 2 days of your life, I know you've probably heard this, are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Why are you here? Why are you here?
That's definitely something we're going to borrow from you. And because I've never really thought about starting in the gratitude space. You know, we obviously help our clients to drill down on their values, clarification, right? And understanding why those are so important to them. And I always love to use that state, don't lie feedback. You know, like, because you can just tell when a client lights up and they lean in and they get really passionate. It's like that neurochemistry is feedback on the play. So please pay attention to that. But since we're talking about the why, I feel like this is where I want to go with you next. So when we're talking to our leaders, we love to take them all the way to the rocking chair. You're talking about our funeral in terms of, you know, what they're going to be saying about us when the shot clock runs out. I like to take my clients to a few minutes before that so that they can actually, again, use the neurochemistry, right, of connecting with how they want to feel right before the shot clock runs out. Because I feel like that to me is how you're going to know. Just like at the end of every hockey game, when I came in my stall and I sat there, I knew if I made it count or if I was, I could have left more on the ice, you know? So it's that feeling of satisfaction and fulfillment, I think, that helps people clarify what truly matters most in terms of why they're here. So what is that for you, sir? When you zoom all the way out to the rocking chair and you contemplate what you want your legacy to be, what is that for you?
I think, Susan, simply put, he was true to what he knew was true. That means something for me. It could mean something different for somebody else. But he was true to what he knew was true. It speaks to integrity. It speaks to honesty. It speaks to authenticity. It speaks to virtue. True to what he knew was true.
Amazing. Ron, we have to ask you this question. It's our favorite question on the show. So, along with being true to what you know is true, what's the legacy you want to leave on the world?
Well, I would say the same thing, but I broaden it. Several years ago, I wrote my purpose statement. What is it that motivates me, inspires me? And it was focused on, as I went through this exercise myself of saying, what's most important to me? Where am I grounded in purpose? What are the elements of that for me? It kind of came down to three things: faith, family, and friends. Faith, family, and friends. And so when I started unpacking that, I realized that I found a great sense of purpose in the following. This is my purpose statement: to be a worthy husband, father, grandfather, and friend, and to help others find joy, meaning, and peace in their life. There's not a lot of peace in our world right now. And I believe there can be sources of peace that can be inside here, that people can find a sense of purpose, and as a result, feel a sense of peace. I believe that we all have a connection with one another as human beings. I believe it's familial. And I believe that if we looked at one another through familial eyes and saw one another in that way, we would have more peace in the world. We would have more peace in the world. And that, coming back to leadership, I think it was Simon Sinek that says leadership is not about being in charge, it's about caring for those in your charge.
Mm-hmm.
We hear the word caring a lot, but what does that really look like? It's not just when people are having a hard time. They lost their house, or they lost their job, or there's lots of people that lean in during those times, right? We see the love and the benefit of humanity in so many ways around us when bad things happen. But what about when it's just the normal day-to-day? How are we treating one another? How are we treating one another with respect and dignity that creates true peace and harmony in the world? I think we have more in common than we realize. We're all on this planet. We're all walking and talking and living and breathing and trying and hopefully thriving, not just surviving, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all doing this together. Let's do it together. Let's do it together, arm in arm. And I think that's what leadership's all about. It's not just what you do, but it's who you are and how you can bring that out in others.
I love it. Folks out there. So, of course, if you want to connect with Ron, you can get in touch with him. I've dropped his LinkedIn in the podcast notes, so you can connect with him there. If you want to find out about PwC, you can go to pwc.com. I don't know why I have to say that part, but yeah, it's there. And then, of course, for all your leadership development, executive coaching needs, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for all of that. Susan, where do you want to leave our folks with today?
I love where we left our folks in terms of that final mic drop. I totally concur. So does Rob, having been team sport athletes, right? In it to win it together. It's we over me. And I feel like that is exactly where we want to leave our audience here at the end of 2024, because I think this is the collective call to purpose. I believe we're all alive right now for a reason. And yes, when you first look out at the current landscape, it looks a bit tumultuous. You know, Ron was referring to the state of the world, even the state of our relationships. You know, this is why we are so confused as to why this whole methodology of purpose, people, and performance isn't the majority, is remaining to be the, minority. We don't understand why, when that clearly is not only a flight path to legacy and playing your biggest impact game as a leader, but as Ron clearly backs up as he helps us make the case with his testimony today, that is also the flight path to how we all collectively rise into our purpose, which I believe is we came here to thrive, not just survive, which is kind of what this whole striving track is really about when we're all working in silos, disconnected. So I am so inspired coming off this interview because it just fortifies, who we are and why we're on this mission, even though we get looked at sideways every time we try to bring this into a corporate space. We know after today's conversation with you, Ron, that we are definitely on our purpose-driven mission. Thank you, sir. This was so inspiring for our audience.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for me, it's back to this call, right? And if you're out there listening and you feel like there's something that's missing or that you're should be doing something bigger or more or feeling just a little bit differently, go on the journey. And you'll never know what you find on the other side. Ron, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Everybody listening, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.